Hello and welcome to the first ever weekly Waypoint half-hour special. I will not be doing a lot of these because I am going to regret this rendering time immediately. Before we start, let me just say that the gameplay you are watching is of Torghast. It is World of Warcraft's take on a roguelite experience. We are on layer 3 of the Soul Forges, and yeah, that's about that. We'll talk more about Torghast in a little bit. What's Torghast? I meant Torghast. This is not thoughts on video, because if it was, it wouldn't have visuals and it would have better thought out and more focused, allegedly, thoughts. I don't really do thoughts on video games. The Pokemon Sword expansion was a bit of a random one, and I was going to do the other one, but then I didn't get around to it, and then I remembered that I usually resort to writing for that, so I'll write more about Pokemon Sword and Shield's DLC probably at the end of the year. Spoiler alert for my Game of the Year listings, and by Game of the Year listings I mean games which I played during the year, all their DLCs that I enjoyed listings. Yes, the reason we're having a half-hour special, of course, is because World of Warcraft Shadowlands released, and you know I can't just talk about that for 10 minutes. You know I can't just talk about that for 20 minutes. Actually, no, if we're being honest, it's just because this run of Torghast took half an hour and I was like, sure, fuck it, why not, let's experiment. For those of you who don't know, World of Warcraft is my favourite video game. It's hugely inspirational, the world that is to me, to the point where I've written the backstories for my own characters. I've even written a few stories based in that world, based around my characters, that kind of a thing. I plan on doing more of that going forwards. I absolutely fucking love the world of Warcraft. Does it always hit the mark? No. But when it does, oh, it's so fucking good. And I am so happy to report that Shadowlands so far absolutely hits the mark. World of Warcraft has this weird kind of thing going on where I don't know if there's any kind of reason behind it or if it's just superstition, but every other expansion is bad and every other expansion is really good. So for instance, I mean, I guess you would have to start with Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, and people liked Burning Crusade, but Wrath of the Lich King was probably the good one out of those two. And then Cataclysm had a lot of problems, and then Mists of Pandaria, the only thing that was really wrong with that, as far as I heard, is that it went on for too long. The final patch was like a year long, and it was like there was a massive content drought and there wasn't anything to do. But other than that, people really enjoyed Pandaria. That's when I started playing. Warlords of Draenor, massive shit show. Legion, people were hailing it as the second golden age of WoW. It was as good as Wrath of the Lich King. Battle for Azeroth, the one we just had its issues. This one, too early to really definitively say, but amazing first impressions. So much of World of Warcraft has been about exploring old characters in new settings, in new story beats around them, changing them. So what happens if Jaina's entire city gets nuked, that kind of a thing. It's always been, well, it hasn't always been, but much of it has been built on the back of the old RTS characters. Garrosh Hellscream was the first real World of Warcraft original character that had a full story arc within the game, for better or for worse. So a lot of World of Warcraft's lore is dependent on its old RTS days. Pandaria, Mists of Pandaria, was the first expansion that really allowed the team to try something almost like 99% completely new, but even that was based on Azeroth, was based within a faction war, and was based with characters that we already knew. Shadowlands feels like basically the team were just like, we want to make something new, we want to explore a completely new area of the World of Warcraft lore, of the cosmology that's barely been explored before. We want basically we want free artistic reign to do what we want. They basically created the Shadowlands with the intent of making it so that every single different realm that you visit within the Shadowlands is completely thematically free. You want to go make the, you know, heavenly spires, well, there's no spires, but the heavenly fields of Bastion with the angels and the fallen angels and all of that kind of a story, go for it. You want to make spooky undead vampire elves? Go for it. You want to make Zombieland like it's just straight out of the cover of a like 80s metal CD? Go for it. You want to be a fairy? Hi, it's me, your boy. Okay, I teed that up kind of weirdly. I don't want to be a fairy, but Fairyland is objectively the best fairy allied race when though. But yeah, sorry, my point is that this expansion really feels refreshing and different and just new. So many World of Warcraft expansions. They are, like, even the good ones, like Legion. I fucking loved Legion. But you know what? It was still on Azeroth. It was still more World of Warcraft. And while it was like the crux of so much story that had led up to it, it was still World of Warcraft. This feels different. I mean, the gameplay still feels like World of Warcraft, of course, but the world, like, it fits in with the game of World of Warcraft and the universe of World of Warcraft. But like, it feels new and fresh, and I'm just gushing at this point, aren't I? Okay, I'll talk about the actual game now instead of the world of Warcraft. Blizzard made a fantastic decision this expansion to scrap the whole you can go to whichever zone in whichever order you want idea, in favour of the previous way of doing it, which was linear questing. And that sounds like a step back, but let me explain myself. So since Legion and Battle for Azeroth, you could attack the zones in whichever order you wanted while you were leveling, and the intent behind this was so that alternative characters wouldn't feel like they were stuck in a rut. In my opinion, that didn't really help at all, but that was the intended idea behind that. But the issue with that then was that you couldn't have a story woven between all of the zones, because if you kill Bob in Zone A and then reference dead Bob in Zone B, then someone who starts with Zone B, it's not going to make sense, because it's going to be like, well, Bob was dead a minute ago, why are we now dealing with Bob dying? You know what I mean? There's no character called Bob. I'm sorry if I'm confusing you. Warlords of Draenor gets a lot of shit, rightfully so as well, but I loved its questing. It was, until this expansion, my absolute favourite questing experience in the game, and one of the things I was so excited for with this pre-patch, which made it so that you can level through an entire expansion to level your character through 1 to 50, was to do that, was to go back to Warlords of Draenor. Didn't do that, didn't make time to do that, whoops. But I was going to do that because I love that story so much. I mean, like, the overarching story of we've gone back in time and this is a parallel universe, and there's different versions of older characters you once knew and the lore plays out slightly differently. That was a big mess. But the smaller stories of, like, learning what the Draenei were like when they were back on Draenor, and you know, like, going through Talador and all of that, and seeing the war between the Draenei and the Orcs, that was really cool. I really enjoyed that, and they could not have done that through their whole pick which zone you want to start with kind of a thing. So the fact that you start with Bastion, then you go to Maldraxxus, then you go to Ardenweald, and then you go to Revendreth, that's really good, and you can see that they really capitalised on this, because there's a really cool transition from Bastion to Maldraxxus, the reason why you go there, and it's the same for all the zones really. For the first time in years, the leveling experience felt like one big long story, and in fact, even more than Warlords of Draenor, it felt like every quest that you did mattered. One of my biggest complaints with Battle for Azeroth was that at the end of Legion, we had just defeated the Legion. We had gone to space, and then a giant evil titan had stuck a giant sword in our planet, and then 5 minutes later, I'm killing Quilboar because they've been attacking the farmer's crops. I'm killing pigmen for a farmer. Why have we gone back to this? The overarching story of Battle for Azeroth was big and grand and flawed, but that's not what I'm talking about here. But the micro quests, like what you were doing on a questing level, just felt like a bunch of random events that had hardly any bearing on the world whatsoever. Suddenly I'm helping a farmer kill a bunch of pigmen. Why do I care about this? I do not care about this. But in Shadowlands, questing through Shadowlands, it's like I'm in Bastion and I'm learning about the fall of the angels, and like all the fallen angels, and why that's a thing, and how the actual angels might be flawed themselves in how they deal with being angels. At no point are they called angels. I should stop calling them angels. The big old macro themes of the expansion are there, and it feels like I'm dealing with those instead of like, oh, this farmer angel over here needs this random spirit snail to stop eating his crops, go and help him out. Like, they could have done that, and then there might be a side quest where they've done that, but on the main questing path, which by the way is a new thing, that there's a main questing path, which might be helping here, in the main questing path it's not a thing. You're dealing with like the main problems of the expansion before you actually get to endgame, and it's delightful. Shadowlands' questing feels like what WoW's questing is meant to be. It tells a story, an important story, an interesting story. It tells some of World of Warcraft's best story in the actual questing portion of the game. And Blizzard did that. They made that amazing questing experience, and then they said you can skip it if you want on your alts. I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, no, you don't have to do all that again. You can just start off doing world quests, and you're earning your renown and doing your Covenant campaign, picking your Covenant and all that. You could just level your character through that stuff if you like. You don't have to, but you can if you like. And I'm like, Blizzard, I love you, thank you. Because to go back to my earlier example, I loved the Warlords of Draenor questing experience, but by the time I was leveling my second alt through it, I was sick to the teeth of it. I won't linger too long on my thoughts about each particular zone, because I have got actual videos coming out where I'm reacting to them as I'm playing them, but Bastion blew me away. I'd seen footage of it online, I'd seen people playing it on streams and stuff. I didn't look too closely at the screen, I was mostly just listening to them talk, but like, I saw the trailers and everything like that. Did not do it justice. Got into the game, and I don't even have my graphics settings very high, but got into the game and was just like, whoa. It feels like every few expansions, it feels like Blizzard somehow managed to milk a little bit more out of the tired old engine that is World of Warcraft, right? They've done it again. This looks a step above BFA. I would say BFA was on par with Legion, but this looks a step above BFA. I am absolutely in love with the storyline that was being told in Bastion, but I gotta say, I'm Team Forsworn. They've got a point, right? Up until Devos said that she was working with the jailer, I was like, yeah, Team Forsworn all the way. Oh, never mind, hang on a minute, they've just thrown their lot in with someone who wants to do some even worse stuff. Some really bad stuff. Some objectively bad stuff. But the whole storyline behind Forsworn is that they don't want to have their memories erased so that they can be of service to the afterlife. They just want to keep their identities. What's so bad about that? I hope at some point, and I haven't started the Kyrian Covenant campaign yet, I'm hoping I can get to it soon, but it's just, I hope that we see more like exploration of that, of maybe some Forsworn who don't want to go all the way with Devos, and maybe like the Kyrian and the Forsworn can come to some kind of compromise. That would be nice, of like, hey, we're not going to force you into service anymore, it's a choice now. I don't even understand the conceit behind the Kyrian having to have their memories erased so that they can perform their service. They ferry souls to the afterlife, they don't judge them, the Arbiter judges them, so why would their memories be a hindrance, you know? Next up we went to Maldraxxus, and I was, maybe not at launch, but a little bit before we learned more about Maldraxxus, I was slightly concerned that I would find it slightly boring compared to the other places, because while the aesthetic is cool, it is just, what if Afterlife big battlefield, and it feels like it has Horde vibes to it, and I've had a lot of trouble getting into the Horde side of questing a lot of the time as well. Hi, hello, I am delighted to report that Maldraxxus was fucking awesome, and I can't wait to take one of my characters, one of my alternate characters to Maldraxxus and learn more about that Covenant. The design of the enemies and the world and the structures of like the architecture of the buildings and everything was just so fucking cool. I need to find a way to talk about things other than just calling them fucking cool, but this was fucking cool. Everything was just big and loud and metal and almost shonen at points, with like the suit of the Primus, and you're making a sword and it's got special powers, and it's like strongest survives. Okay, I guess it wasn't really shonen. I should stop referring to things that are badass as shonen. It was definitely badass though. And while the soundtrack to this entire expansion is amazing, I think Maldraxxus' soundtrack stands out the most to me. The just like the spooky heavy metal kind of atmosphere. It, like, I could just conjure it in my brain right now. With new soundtracks normally it takes a while before I become that familiar with them, but I can just imagine it in my head right now. It's just got such a distinctive sound to it, it's great. Ardenweald. Ardenweald. Prettier than Bastion. Emotionally stirring. And listen, I'm working on becoming more of an emotionally stirrable person when it comes to fiction. But World of Warcraft, as much as I bloody love this universe, it's never brought me to tears. But It almost did with that questing, and I'm not gonna give it away, just in case people listening to this who haven't played it yet, who don't have interest in playing it, but then maybe 6 months down the line change their mind and they already know something because they watched this video. It happens. I'm not going to give it away. But there was a lovely surprise, really great build up into it, really important lore, especially for my character, and not like my personal character, but just like my class and race, and it was just perfect. That zone was made for me. Go watch my video on it if you're interested to see what I'm talking about. I've never been so emotionally invested in questing, and I've been emotionally invested in questing, but never that emotionally invested in questing. I gotta say, it was never made hugely obvious why certain Night Fae were being warped into doing evil things. I think it was the Drust putting the masks on them and warping their mind, but they never overtly said it. It just kind of feels like that bit of story got missed out, or maybe I missed it and it got said somewhere and I missed it, but I feel like I should bring that up. Also, they haven't told us why the Drust are in Ardenweald yet either, but by the looks of the names of the chapters in the Covenant campaign, because spoilers, that's a Covenant I chose, as you can probably already tell by the video, I think we're probably getting to that. If I had to choose a least favourite zone out of all of them, and I love all of them, I think they are all masterpieces, but if I had to choose a least favourite, I am surprised to tell you that it would be Revendreth. It's amazing, I love it, but I love gothic vampire stuff, and something about it just didn't resonate with me as strongly as I thought it would. I don't know how to say that without overlooking the fact that I fucking love it, but just like, if the other zones are a 10 out of 10, Revendreth is more of like a 9 out of 10. Is that too nitpicky of me? I love the little imp looking dudes who are just like Scouser sounding, like, where'd you get all them teeth? Like, it's amazing. Or is that Scouser sounding? I don't know what accent that is. It's a region of England. I immediately realised that me and Reese will be quoting them to each other for the next 2 years. I really like the concept of sin stones, and I've heard the whole lore behind like true names being able to compel people. I've seen that somewhere before. I've seen that in a few places before. I might have already talked about this before the expansion came out actually, but I wonder what the origin of that kind of thing is. But what I really like about this spin on it is that their true names aren't like this eldritch like thing. It's just a name they had on Azeroth, it's just their names. What they go by in Revendreth is usually a title, like the Lord Chamberlain. We don't know his true name, and come to think of it, I don't think we learned it. I did the dungeon with him in, but I don't think we learned it. But yeah, I love the idea of just like, oh yeah, no, the Sinstone just tells you your mortal name, basically, or just tells people your mortal name, and it also lists all of the crimes you did. And I think one of my favourite parts about Revendreth is just picking up people's Sinstones and looking at them, and learning about the wider Warcraft universe in the mortal realm, just by reading these Sinstones and being like, oh right, yeah, there's a whole universe out there. We've just experienced Azeroth and Draenor and a few other planets. The final patch of Legion did that too, where you could go through portals to individual worlds, and they had names and everything, and you could kind of glean a little bit of a story based on what they looked like, what was going on there. They were definitely Legion dominated worlds with no life left on them, but they were still like, some of them still looked like their original habitat. Like one looked like a forest that you might find on Azeroth. One actually looked a lot like Ardenweald, not quite as glowy and fey, but it looks very like kind of night. I wonder if there's going to be some connecting lore there of like a connection between the two. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the glowy bear that you meet in Ardenweald comes from that forest that you found from one of those portals on Argus at the end of Legion, you know. She mentions that she came from a forest world until green fire rained down from the skies, so if it isn't that world, I feel like it's at least meant to be a callback to it, or like a world like it, but I'm losing myself in lore implications here. That's what I like about Revendreth, just like, whoa, what are these names and these places, and like a reminder that one of the coolest parts about the Shadowlands is that it's for everyone, for all mortals across the entire universe. And if you've been seeing in this footage here, occasionally there's like a spirit with like no legs. He's just kind of floating there. In fact, I think there's one to the left there. Oh no, that's a key. But he just kind of looks like a humanoid spirit with like no face, no legs. He's very vague. That they have stated, Blizzard have stated, that is what races that you have never met look like to you in the Shadowlands. And I feel like upwards of there's one right there. I feel like upwards of 80% of the spirits you meet in Shadowlands, or at least in Torghast, look like that. Which is exciting because you can come across the odd orc or tauren or stuff. And I have to wonder that if in the future there is an expansion where we go to another world in the mortal plane, if they will then retroactively add those as some of these in Torghast for people doing old content. So they're like, hang on, wait a minute, this race didn't exist back in Shadowlands. It's like, oh no, they retroactively added it. I would love it if they did that. But yeah, also the whole theme of vampires and Gothic castles, and you know, just Syed and Aphrius in general. Like I said, there was something that didn't quite hit me as fully as I was expecting, but I did love it. And Syed and Aphrius is up to some hijinks, and I'm excited to find out more when Castle Nathria comes out. I'm also very excited to take my arcane mage over to do the Covenant stuff and learn more about those vampire dudes. I think, you know, now that I think about it, I think my problem with Revendreth is it's just slightly too muted in colour. I thought it would be more like gothic black and red, but there's a lot more brown in there and grey than I was expecting, maybe. Nitpicking. So yeah, that takes us up to endgame. And Infinity War was great. No, I'm joking. No, I was going to say that so far I really like the Covenant system, and not just because Convoke the Spirits is objectively the most fun, balanced druid possible Covenant ability. I mean, come on, you shoot like 16 druid spells out in 4 seconds, it's amazing. I don't care if it's not meta, by the way. I don't know if it is or not, I don't care. I just care that it's fun. That's how most people should. If we're not mythic raiding. Anyway, yeah, I really like it because one of the first things that happened, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but one of the first things that happened when I joined the Night Fae Covenant in Ardenweald is a continuation of that story. We learned more about that story, and also it was just a really fucking funny introduction quest. You'll see soon in my video that I put up about it, but I was legitimately laughing. So yeah, I really like how Covenants continue the story, and by the looks of things will continue the story. It seems like Renown is time locked for the moment, and the story will continue with that as we go along, and that's both good and bad. It depends how well they achieve that, but I am excited for the prospect of the story of the expansion continuing in the weeks ahead of the expansion release, instead of just being delivered to you all at once and then you just kind of have to wait for the next content drop for more story to happen, you know. It's always in danger of feeling artificial because you know that stuff technically exists in the game and is just being time walled off from you, but it feels like there's enough to do in the meantime that it's not like, oh, we want you to stay subbed for as long as possible, because whether you believe them or not, the game devs say that they don't design content around that idea. I think it is more akin to just making sure that you always have some content to do, some upgrades to unlock in the weeks from content to keep you invested, but also not to just hit you with it all at once and make you feel forced to try and get through it as quickly as possible, because that usually happens. I'm certain players who play World of Warcraft for like 8 hours a day or more, and that's not a jab, I used to be one of those people, it's fine. I'm sure those players are annoyed, or could be annoyed by that prospect, but for people like me who play for maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, or will do when the new expansion hype has calmed down, for people who just play for 2 or 3 hours a day and like to log on and do their thing, it's really awesome, the prospect of like, that might be a story thing and a new thing to do instead of just like a bit of a grind to get towards a reputation to Exalted, you know. I'm here for it, especially with the different Covenants all having different campaigns like that, and you know, like having 4 different characters with each of them seeing a different side of a story. I'm really excited to do that. And plus, each Covenant has some really cool looking cosmetic unlocks. There's mounts, there's armor, there's a title at the end. It's going to be great. So yeah, I haven't fully experienced it yet, but I've dipped my toes into the alt character leveling experience, which is called the Threads of Fate. You still have to do the Moor introduction, and as I was doing my Paladin, I quickly learned what everyone else was talking about when they said how annoying it is that you can't mount up in the Moor. hashtag first world druid problems. No, that doesn't make sense. Hashtag druid privilege, there you go. For those unaware, druids can still use 100% travel form speed in the Moor, it's great. But yeah, you still have to do the Moor introduction, but when you get to Oribos, time stops and an NPC talks to you, he's like, hey, do you want to keep doing this, or do you want to do the Threads of Fate thing? And basically that means that you can instantly go and sign up at your Covenant. Now, I thought this also meant that you would immediately start down the Covenant campaign of a story, but instead what happens is that the main questing campaign is replaced with a Threads of Fate campaign, and your Covenant leader basically says, hey, go aid go aid our zone. So my first thing to do is to aid Bastion, and what I need to do is do that by completing world quests, which are immediately available to me, or bonus objectives, or side quests, or killing rares, or finding treasures. I think those are all of them. And that fills up a bar, and when that gets to 100%, she's going to send me to Maldraxxus, and then Ardenweald, and then Revendreth, and then I think at that point I might be able to start the story, but I don't know if I might need to hit level 60 first. My praise of this system will depend on that, because if you have to hit level 60 first, then that kind of feels like that system's being put on pause until you grind out levels. So I will have more to say about the Threads of Fate system in the future when I've fully experienced it. But so far I'm just really happy that they've put it in. It's the first time they've done something like that that's purely for alternate characters. And it's a really good compromise, because you can still tackle whichever zone you want in whichever order by basically choosing that zone as a Covenant. You know, the questing storyline isn't going to get stale from doing it over and over again, but if in a year's time I'm like, hey, I would really like to refresh my memory, or just like cruise through the questing instead of immediately doing the alt experience where I probably pop a podcast on and just fill up those bars, then that's still available to me as well, so I'm super happy with it. I wouldn't be surprised if when this expansion becomes an old one though, and we're doing something else in the future, if the Threads of Fate thing goes away, and then the campaign of this expansion just gets melded into Chromie Time Walking. That would be fine too. I think it's just really good for when it's the main expansion 10 to 60, 50 to 60 experience. Now, I do just quickly want to say that I preferred Battle for Azeroth's Balanced Druid. It was, in my experience, since I've been playing since Mists, the best version of that spec. But I don't hate the changes as much as I was worried that I was going to. And, I mean, you've seen me playing this spec all throughout this video, but I'm not perfect at it yet. There's still some patterns that I need to learn. And as far as gameplay goes, by the way, I know that I don't use enough interrupts. I basically remembered that I had more than one here during this particular boss fight, and I know I don't use Starfall enough. I'm sorry, okay, I'm not perfect. But yeah, I think Battle for Azeroth's system of building up eclipses and it being a charge of free spells instead of a timer down, and not having to work your way up to them, but or like, look, I can't remember all the intricacies off the top of my head, okay, I'm sorry. But I basically just preferred how Balanced Druid worked in BFA, but I don't hate it here. I just would choose BFA out of the two. But then, if I had to choose between this one and the Warlords of Draenor version, I would choose this one in a heartbeat. The Warlords of Draenor version of Balanced Druid was horrible. So that's some feedback or thinking or thoughts that's very specific to me and my character, Sods. I have not talked about Torghast yet. Sorry, that's what you're watching right now. So Torghast, like I said at the start of the video, is World of Warcraft's take on a roguelite, and as you can see here, you still get powers and stuff like you would in a roguelite. They let you basically break your character if you get really good anima powers, and I think that's amazing, because obviously they don't follow you outside the dungeon. And having a single player PvE experience like this, it doesn't have to be single player, you can bring your friends, but having a single player playable PvE experience like this is going to prove vital to my enjoyment of this game, because dungeons, I like doing dungeons, but I don't like the timer system of Mythic Plus, it stresses me out. And as far as raids goes, I only ever do LFR really. Even though I'm in a raiding guild, I just can't really do the time commitment thing. So to have an experience that's like endgame, like current content, but it's truly 100% soloable, and it's like skill based, and there's no timer, and there's no payment to get in, there's no weekly lockout kind of a thing. It's just there to do and progress in. I'm so fucking here for it. So far I've only explored for Soul Forges, but it looks like there's many different wings with many different kind of appearances to them, and I really hope that in future Blizzard continue to build on this and add to it, because otherwise unfortunately it's going to start feeling stale, I fear, a year down the line. But if they continue adding to it and continue adding new wings to it, and then maybe down in future expansions they add new versions of like this experience, that would be fantastic too. I really hope that this pans out and that they continue focusing on soloable PvE content, because I know this is an MMO, but some of us like to play it for like the social aspects, like being in a guild and seeing people around and having cosmetics and stuff like this, but they're just not really into the whole make sure you're there every Friday night for the 25-man raid and make sure you're geared up and everything, and be on comms and don't fuck up, because otherwise everyone will get annoyed. And you know, I know like it depends on your guild. I've got a fairly good guild. I'm not saying that they would immediately shout at me and stuff like that, but I don't want to let them down, kind of a thing. And then also with Mythic Dungeons, like the timer, just again, you don't want to be the guy who accidentally pulls an extra pack of mobs and makes everyone miss out on their loot. It's like I'm not about it. It makes me anxious. So yeah, having something like this that I can just tackle at my own pace, and my own failures are my own fault and they don't impact anybody else, I super appreciate it. And I think they've been experimenting with something like this for a while with the previous expansions, Horrific Visions and Island Expeditions and all that kind of stuff. Problem was, Island Expeditions were kind of boring, and it wasn't solo either. Sorry, that's a really bad example actually. But Horrific Visions were fine, but they had like a lockout, and if you fucked up it was like, well, I've just wasted my lockout, kind of a thing. So this is nice. I'm still exploring Torghast. I think there were people talking about there is like a weekly run to do or something, but I might be wrong. But that's fine, because you've still got this like progression based version here, which you're currently seeing me playing. So yeah, I guess in summary, I'm over the moon with this expansion. It's made such a great first impression with me. It's been out for about a week now, and well, it's been out for almost exactly a week now, and it's been a really good first week. The thing that worries me is that I absolutely adored Warlords of Draenor in its first week too, but I think the problems with the garrison and all that were apparent pretty immediately, and I just wasn't like in tune with the community discussion. The community discussion around this expansion so far has been pretty positive, I would say. The only real bad thing is that they keep getting DDoS'd by arseholes, but they can't really help that, can they? But Ardenweald today, oh god, that was like you would click a corpse and it would take like 10 seconds to loot it. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but it would take like 3 or 4 seconds to loot it. It was horrible. Anyway, thank you for listening, love you, goodbye.